Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session. We are so happy to have you here with us today. My name is Jared Fitzpatrick, and I'm on the Canaries team focused on user engagement and outreach. I'll be your moderator today, and I'm joined by my colleagues from Canaries, Stacy, our Director of Business Development, and Mandy, our CEO. A few housekeeping items before we get started. First, to ensure that everyone can hear during this discussion and there's no distractions, please keep your microphones on mute. If you do have any audio or video issues, please reach out to Stacy and she can provide instructions to help you. Second, this is an interactive session and we want to hear your questions. You can ask questions using the Q&A feature during the webinar, and then we'll have 15 minutes at the end of the session just to answer your questions. Third, this session is being recorded and we will share the recording with you via email after the webinar ends. It looks like we have people trickling in. So for those of you joining us, again, just wanted to say welcome. Again, my name is Jared Fitzpatrick. I'm the Vice President of User Engagement at Canaries. My initial exposure to diversity and inclusion really came from leading employee resource groups and managing organizational transformation projects when I was working as a management consultant at PricewaterhouseCoopers and Huron Consulting Group. And when I made that leap from consulting into full-time D&I and culture work, I quickly realized that there was a gap between what companies' initiatives were focused on and what the actual outcomes for attracting, engaging, and retaining diverse talent actually yielded. And that's really where I found Canaries and the solution in Canaries. And Canaries is, in a nutshell, a platform that allows people to anonymously rate their employers on issues related to the lived experiences of people from diverse backgrounds. Our mission at Canaries is to improve workplace culture and to foster more inclusive environments. We've also provided an opportunity for people in the platform to leave reviews on their employer, to talk about benefits, employee resource groups, and policies. We then use that information to help companies make data-driven decisions about their D&I initiatives and build specifically tailored dashboards that include different D&I metrics that create real change instead of just these checkbox diversity and inclusion efforts. So as part of our ongoing commitment to supporting diversity and inclusion, we have created this multi-part webinar series that focuses on helping D&I leaders advance inclusion during this COVID-19 pandemic. Last week, we had Laura Ramirez from Ericsson, and this week, we are thrilled to have Chris Moreland with Vizient with us today to discuss the silver lining, how COVID-19 has led to greater inclusion. Welcome, Chris. Glad to have you with us today.
Thank you, Jared. Pleasure to be here.
Awesome. So Chris is the Chief Inclusion and Diversity Advocate for Vizient. In this capacity, he leads all inclusion and diversity efforts, which includes the company's diversity networking associations. He chairs an executive diversity steering committee, as well as a network of healthcare chief diversity officers. He also speaks on diversity and inclusion related topics within healthcare and beyond. Prior to really creating the Office of Inclusion and Diversity at Vizient, Chris was the Senior Vice President of Sales Operations at Vizient. Over his 20-plus year career, he has held multiple senior executive roles with companies such as the General Electric Corporation, Johnson & Johnson, Pepsi, Mobile, Expedia, and Microsoft. Chris spends much of his free time volunteering with nonprofit organizations such as Integrity Mentors. He also consults with the Dallas-based Parkland Center for Clinical Initiatives, or PCCI, and is an active board member of the International Leadership of Texas, as well as CoreMed, Inc. Chris has a Bachelor's of Science degree in engineering from the United States Air Force Academy, a Master's in Business Administration from Central Michigan University, a Certificate of Inclusion and Diversity from Cornell University, and is a certified Master Black Belt in Quality. A native of Cleveland, Ohio, Chris now lives in Dallas and enjoys cycling, reading, and spending his time with his family. And on a personal note, Chris is my valued friend and mentor, and is probably one of the most engaging people that I know. So thank you so much, Chris, for being with us. We are excited to hear from you today. So if it's okay, we can jump right in. And as people continue to join, they can connect with us and engage with us. Again, if you're just joining, we want you to ask questions, and you can do that by adding in your questions in the Q&A feature. All right, so while we know that COVID-19 has had a devastating effect on the economy and on society, there have been some unexpected benefits for inclusion. One such benefit is that there is now an increased reliance on remote communications, which improves access for people who are differently abled and people who are primary caretakers of family members. So Chris, have you seen any of these benefits manifest in your personal or professional life? And then a second part of that question is, have you noticed any unexpected negative disadvantages?
Right. So again, Jarrett, Stacy, and Mandy, I can't tell you how much I appreciate the opportunity to be with you guys today. And I am so excited that you guys have chosen to use this downtime from our normal environment to actually engage individuals across the country in talks like this. I think this is one of the best uses of our time right now, is to take a pause and really think about not only what's important, but also how am I preparing myself for what I will now call the new normal, not only within our work environments, but also within our personal environment. So how has inclusion been a focus of this pandemic that we've been sorting through over the past several weeks? I'll tell you personally, a couple of things that I've noticed is that, one of my hobbies is, spending time with my family. I have pretty much maxed out on that hobby. There is, there are 4 kids and a dog that are now in the house with me 100% of the time. And at some point during this session, you may hear a 12-pound dog yapping to get in my room because he likes to do that. And what I've found, and I'm sure many of you have found, is that our new normal has more of a, what I'll call an empathic focus on other people's situations and circumstances. I will tell you, I don't know in the history of me being around on this earth that I've seen the insides of so many individuals' houses. I mean, everything from newscasters to celebrities, everything that you would normally see, this beautiful, perfect background. You are now looking down corridors of kitchens and bedrooms and home offices and everything else, which I think is really interesting because it gives you a bit more insight. For me personally, I love the idea that as a nation, as a world, actually, this pandemic has caused us to come together. And what I mean by that is that this virus that we were all diligently fighting, it doesn't discriminate. It doesn't stop based on your age, based on your physical ability or inability. It doesn't stop based on where you are located. It doesn't stop based on your socioeconomic condition, your religious preference, your social economic condition, your sexual orientation. It does not stop. It absolutely consumes and has a way of wanting to attack all of us. And so it brings out what I call the human side of all of our beings. And, it's interesting. A few years back, I gave a talk on inclusion and diversity. And I said, one of the things that I thought would really bring us together as a people is if there was a spaceship that landed on Earth that was threatening to take over the world, we would all come together in defense of humankind. And I'm not saying that COVID-19 as a spacecraft from another planet, but it does seem to act as though it does not discriminate the individuals that it affects. And it has created a need for all of us to think about our connectedness just from a human perspective. It is very difficult to turn on the TV or radio any day or night and not hear about some of the tragic losses associated with this disease. And so it has made each one of us a little bit more connected with one another. I live in a neighborhood where most people come out on the streets, but only on the weekends, on a really, really nice day. And because of the way we've been quarantined over the last several weeks, you see people out walking with their dogs and families day and night. And I have to tell you, there have been more people who have spoken to me in the last 2 weeks than have in probably the last 3 years of living here. And I am so appreciative of that. I look at my neighbors now and I try to figure out if they need anything. Like a couple of my kids were asking some of the more elderly neighbors if they needed anything from the grocery store so that they could not have to necessarily come out the house. And that was a way for us to actually connect with our neighbors in a very, very real way. So from a personal perspective, I would say that the pandemic has actually caused us all to think about each other from a very human perspective. On a more professional basis, I will tell you, this work from home thing, which we all used to question a few months ago, has now just become a normal way of connecting with one another. It has made me a lot more sensitive to conference calls that you get on during the day, and you know that there is somebody who is on the call and they're probably in a work from home situation and they're not in the room right there, and you almost forget about them. And because of the way we've had to connect with each other over the last several weeks, it has made me personally a lot more sensitive to some of the distractions that would cause individuals who are working remote or working from home, they have to deal with on a regular basis. A lot of times you're on conference calls, back to back, like there was no break. I started at 8 o'clock this morning. I'll finish around 6 o'clock this morning, and there's literally, there's no break. And so you have to figure out, okay, like, when am I going to drink or eat something? And at some point I'm going to have to take a bodily break. And that's something that people who have been working remote and who have been, dealing with this mode of communication for a very long time, they've all had to figure out. And so now all of us are in the process of figuring it out. So I think it has made all of us really rethink things that we may not have ever had to even consider before. And more importantly, I think it has really highlighted our common humanity and the fact that we are all fighting against something that has the potential of attacking each one of us, and in a very, very real way. Great question. Love that question, Jared.
Thank you, Chris. One thing I forgot to mention in your bio is that you are a master storyteller. And so I see that every time I talk with you, and I definitely see that right now. Yeah. So moving more into your professional life, we know that Vizient is the nation's largest hospital-owned healthcare services company and national supply chain leader. So how have you seen your business change as a result of this new environment?
Yeah, it's a great question. Like most businesses, right now, we've absolutely seen fluctuations. So our business is one that receives revenue as we are in support of healthcare systems, and so a lot of their purchasing has shifted, meaning that right now healthcare systems are purchasing items in a way that they haven't in the past, because right now they're purchasing items that are very much tied to the pandemic. So things that in the past probably were not in short supply, we're finding out today, as many of you know, are running in short supply. You're having to get very creative on where we're sourcing some of those products from. Some of you may have seen in the past a news update on what is happening from a supply chain perspective. As you can imagine, the White House has actually been in contact with our CEO to kind of help provide insight and guidance on how we should be navigating this from a supply chain perspective here in the States. As a matter of fact, even this evening, I think our CEO will be back in DC, either advising or working directly with Mike Pence and Donald Trump on ways of trying to solve for some of the shortages that we're seeing across the entire country, as well as helping to set up temporary hospitals across the country in areas where the pandemic has just wreaked havoc on the populations. So we have been called into a very critical role, very much outside of our normal day-to-day way of doing business. But I think most people right now are being called to do things that normally they would never have thought they have been called to do, because these are just very, very different circumstances we're all having to deal with and figure out how to navigate through.
Yeah, that's good. At Canaries, as I mentioned earlier, our goal is to make workplaces more inclusive through data-driven strategies. And right now, what we've seen is a lot of companies are taking those additional steps to survey their employees and really tailor their D&I and engagement approaches to address these employees' immediate needs working remotely. Have you done any data gathering to understand the experience of your employees? And if so, have you discovered any trends?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that's an area where I have to give kudos to Canaries overall for even having the platform to do something like this. I think this is a period of time in life right now where this solution, I think, should be top of mind for everyone. At our organization, even as of this morning, we literally have sent out a survey to try to find out what everyone is thinking and how are people navigating their new situation. Outside of the survey, I've had the fortunate opportunity to be in contact with several people in a different capacity, and I've just found out that their responses are variable. Some people are very just anxious to get back into the workplace. They want to get back to what they consider normal, and that means, driving into the office, seeing people at work, going to lunch with people, just that whole human connection. A lot of people are just very excited about that. Others are in a state of what I would just call caution, where they're not as anxious to be back in contact with other people, just because they understand that in some instances, human connection, if done too soon, could cause harm to them personally. So they're a little apprehensive. And I think other people are of the mindset that they've now figured out that, after a month of working at home, this might need to be my new office. I've kind of gotten used to it. It's interesting. There are a lot of people who I would call just introverts, meaning that they get so much energy in being by themselves. They look at this as a vacation, and they view the opportunity to work from home at their own pace as a way of actually bringing more of themselves to work. Others of us who are extroverts are going crazy. Like, we don't get to ride the elevator with other people. We don't get to say hi to people at lunch and do high fives. And so for us extroverts, this is a rare form of torture. So I'm so happy Canaries has this, just so I know that at the end of the day, I'm surrounded by a group of people who like at some point to connect with other people. And so I'll tell you, we just sent out our first official survey today, and I'll be interested in what the results are. But those three buckets of different ways of thinking is what I have personally just gathered from the few data points of having connected with other people. But I am going to be very adamant about suggesting that we actually incorporate Canaris in our business, because I really think that there is something there when people can anonymously give feedback and know that their feedback is just going to be used to create a more inclusive culture. And I do think that that solution is one that a lot of organizations should really consider right now, especially as we start planning for the future and trying to figure out what is our new normal going to really be and look like moving forward.
Awesome. And I heard you so loud and clear when you were talking about the introverts like myself who gain energy from being at home right now. And this has been nice. But then I also hear your perspective, because I know you're an extreme extrovert and you need that. You gain so much energy from being around people. So I can understand that too. All right. So I think much like you, many HR and D&I professionals are really feeling the weight of the employees who are scared about the future, and they're under a lot of pressure to deliver on new D&I initiatives and to make sure that surveys are going out. How would you help, or how are you helping your employees on your team to really see the silver lining in this pandemic?
Yeah. So that's a great question. Kind of the whole topic of this entire topic is that I think that, you know, everyone should be taking what I call personal inventory of themselves. In other words, regardless of what you were doing back in January or February of this year, you have had the opportunity over the last couple of months to really rethink what's important to you and really focus on yourself and taking inventory of yourself. And I think that there are a lot of opportunities right now to really rethink how are you going to show up and what you're going to do different. The one bad part about the pandemic is that it has had a devastating effect on a lot of people, not only in our country, but across the globe, across the world. And I think that the one silver lining to all of this is the fact that it has caused us all to seriously think about our connectivity. And when I say our connectivity, I mean those things that make us more alike than different. The fact that we are all vulnerable to something that has the effect that this pandemic has had on all of our lives makes us rethink our similarities and hopefully allows us to think about ways of coming together in a more real sense. I hate the idea that something so drastic has happened across the globe that has really not only shut down our economy, but for a lot of people, this has created a very has created a hardship on them personally, because they've either been affected themselves, they know someone who has been affected, or they're in a situation where they really could not afford to not be going to work or being employed on a regular basis. And so it has caused everyone to kind of take a step back and slow down and really think about, you know, what's important and how should I be showing up, not just for myself, but for others who are potentially being affected. I think part of the silver lining here is for us to double down on empathy. And I use this word very intentionally because empathy means having the ability to connect with another person at an emotional level. Like, for instance, on this Skype right now, there are people who are probably trying to triple task. They're trying to take care of their kids who are home right now. They're trying to take care of their pets that are, whining for food. And they're also, quite frankly, trying to figure out, okay, what is May going to look like? What is June of 2020 going to look like? And if we sit back and in judgment, think about them as either being distracted or not having a good plan, then that separates us. If we think about other individuals from an empathic perspective, we think about, how can I help them? How can I be more sensitive to their own personal situation? And how can I connect with them in a way that makes their lives better and collectively makes all of our lives better? The one thing that I think that the whole pandemic has done from a silver lining perspective is it has made all of us rethink what's important and how am I showing up and how am I creating a world that is going to be better, not just for me, but for everybody. How can I be part of a broader solution? And how do I, in what I am doing, affect people that in a way that I'm potentially not even aware of? This is probably the first time in the last 25 years of my professional career that I haven't had to get up and commute someplace every day. And so that extra time in the morning and in the evenings where I'd normally be spending in the car, you can actually spend it doing something a little more productive. And how am I doing that? Where am I spending my time? And who am I giving my time to? So there are certain people right now who are really in a really tough situation because, they were very dependent on foot traffic if you work in retail, or they were very dependent on, hours being worked because that's how they were being paid. And now their life has just been shaken upside down and they're not sure about tomorrow. And you may live right next door to some of those people and you don't even know it. And how am I and how are we collectively thinking about our neighbors and our friends and our associates who may not necessarily feel at liberty to tell you exactly what's going on, but how do we look at them through a very empathic view? How do we think about them in a way that connects us in a real sense? So from my perspective, the silver lining is we have all taken a little bit of a recess from our day-to-day routines, and it has allowed us to come and think about things from a very different perspective. And if we use that time productively, and if we use that time in a very effective way, I think what it will do is allow us to really reconnect with who we are and also reconnect with our humanity in connection with other human beings and just being more empathic with them.
And Chris, that was deep.
Too deep, probably. Huh?
That should go in the book. Well, I think a lot of times people talk about emotional intelligence and being aware, but you're really talking about taking that next step and practicing empathy, and that's the most important thing that we can do right now. So, this is the last planned question that I have, and then I'm going to open it up to some of the questions that we have from the audience. Okay. So, if you're listening right now and you have a question, please feel free to go ahead and put it into the Q&A feature. We have a couple that we've already had asked, so I will ask this last one and then let it be open to the audience. Okay. So while some employers, as you mentioned, are hiring frantically to meet demand, think about Amazon and Target and CVS and others, there are some other employers who really are facing this harsh reality of layoffs, furloughs for their employees. So how can leaders listening now help organizations and employees that are going through a reduction in force?
Yeah, that's like the $1 million question right now, Jarrett. And if you watch the statistics that are being published every day across the United States, what you'll notice is that in January of this year, I think we were at almost an all-time low as far as unemployment goes. We were down around 3.8%, 3.4%. I know we were below 4%. That trend carried all the way up through the beginning of March, right before what we traditionally would call spring break, which is where we started seeing the cases of the virus affecting the US. And then from there, the unemployment rate, as well as the filings for unemployment, started going through the roof. As of today, April 14th, because I checked it this morning, I think we were right at 17% unemployment and 17 million people filing for unemployment. And they are projecting right now that as we continue this trajectory, by May, we'll be at 20% unemployment, and obviously probably north of 20 million people having filed for unemployment. So this is a real issue right now in our country, and it's a $1 million question, because having a solution for this, I think right now is critical, is crucial for not only our economy, but just the livelihood of people who are being affected by this. So what should leaders be focusing on right now in the face of having to potentially either have this conversation or receive this conversation, having been at a organization or a company that has to furlough or do layoffs in some sort? I would say the first thing is you have to think about this. Again, I'll go back to the word empathy from a very empathic perspective. One, it could happen to literally any of us right now, because we really don't know and haven't seen clear to where and how long this pandemic will last in our country. And I think that you have to, first of all, be very truthful and objective with individuals, because they're trying to make plans for their livelihood. And so I don't think that you should hold back information as far as the likelihood of a furlough. But I do think that you should do it from a very empathic perspective, meaning that you have to try to put yourself in another person's shoes just for a moment, so that you can connect with and understand what they may be going through. Some people will see this as a break and love every second of it. Other people will see this as a hardship and panic to get to the next employment opportunity. In both cases, if and when a furlough or a layoff happens, I think the first thing that you should do is make sure that you have all the facts that are available to you at the time right in front of you, so that you can speak very clearly. And then again, with an empathic perspective, an empathic voice, I think that you should communicate what is going to happen for sure, what you foresee as a potential outcome for that person individually. And then you always want to give advice on what options you believe they may have on the other side of the furlough. To your point earlier, Jared, there are a lot of organizations right now that are going through layoffs and furloughs, and it's horrible. I think about organizations like American Airlines, who, right now, if you read anything on CNN, you know that air traffic has gone down by 90%, meaning that the majority of flights that are flying with literally, a handful of people on an entire plane, which means that, obviously that business model is not going to be able to survive itself. I think about individuals at places like American and other travel organizations who used to pack bags into the airplane, individuals who used to check travelers for their flights. And I can imagine how underemployed they are right now, and how they may be thinking about what is about to happen. And again, my thoughts and prayers go out to them daily. But with that said, I think on the other side of this equation, I think the best thing you can do is equip yourself with the handful of organizations that are actually, trying to staff up right now. If you read anything, that organizations like, Amazon, Costco, every home delivery food service in this country right now is ramping up. All of your grocery stores are ramping up. And so connecting those two resources together, I think, is another opportunity for the leader to be aware of so they can communicate, and also for the employee, quite frankly, to just be aware of right now so that they have options and opportunities, beyond moving into a situation that will hopefully not happen, but potentially might make things even worse as you move forward. So, great question, though.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, our first question from the attendees is from Bernadette Smith. And Bernadette asked, do you think that organizations will continue to better compensate and respect customer-facing employees post-COVID-19?
Wow, that's a
tough question.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. Customer-facing individuals within any organization, I view them as the bread and butter and face of that organization. I can remember when I was working in fast food for several years, one of the I considered most important employees in that business model was the person who you put on the front counter that was going to greet every customer that walked through the door. Back when I was, in high school and I worked at a law firm, and this was back when you actually had receptionists that greeted everyone who walked into the organization. In my mind back then, that person was the most important person for that organization because they represented the brand. And you always wanted a person who had the personality and the ability to make you feel welcomed as soon as you walked into that restaurant or walked into that organization. And so the question around should these people and how will these people potentially be compensated based on what is going on right now with COVID, I will tell you personally, I think your bread and butter lies in the individuals who actually represent your brand from a customer facing perspective. But that being said, I do think that there is going to be a shift. And when I say a shift, what I mean is I think there is going to be a shift in how we think about customer facing roles. I think there's going to be a shift in how we think about all of our roles moving forward. I think there's going to be a shift in what we consider high value within an organization. And I do think that if you are customer facing in any capacity right now or moving into the future, you will still be considered of high value. Whether that will equate to higher compensation or not, I think that's going to be dependent upon the organization and the way that organization is structured relative to the market and demand for whatever they are servicing to their customers. But in my opinion only, I do think that there is a high value in individuals who serve in the capacity of being customer-facing individuals. So it's a great question.
All right, thank you. Next question is from Joe Bryant. And Joe's question is, how are you planning to adjust your strategy with your executive I&D steering committee to include a response to COVID-19?
No, that's a really good question. And that is work in progress. That's actually something that we were just meeting about today. And it is something that we are considering actively right now. In the past, I think that we took for granted the idea that we were able to meet in person and discuss a lot of very critical items with individuals who will have to lead the organization moving forward. Right now, as of today, the way we're thinking about it is that we want to see what is going to happen over the next probably month or so, but we want to probably delay doing anything with our leaders, at least having our leaders do anything drastic right now until we can get back in front of people live. There is something that is gained by doing Zoom meetings like this and hosting calls like this, because this allows for a ton of flexibility. It also allows for a lot of things to be done in a lot more efficient way. But there's also something that is lost when you're looking at a person over a media versus seeing them standing in front of you. I think for leaders within an organization, especially around the topic of inclusion and diversity, there is something that is gained by seeing the body language, understanding the intonations, and listening to words coming out of a leader's mouth, and then having it reinforced by their physicality. There is so much communication that you can do over a medium like this, and it's fantastic. It serves a great purpose. But I feel as though, especially if me as a leader in an organization am talking about a very critical topic associated with diversity and inclusion, one of the things that fuels me in talking with individuals is also getting feedback, nonverbal feedback from those individuals as I'm actually discussing things. And so one of the things that we've decided to do as of recent actually is we're going to continue moving our diversity and inclusion effort forward, but we're going to hold off on having individual leaders actually taking more of a leadership role, especially when it comes to their teams and their organizations. And we're going to try to hope for an in-person presentation or communication versus doing it over a medium. But side note, if we are in a position like we are today, a few months down the road from now, I think we're going to probably readdress that and maybe even switch our focus and try to do something in the virtual mode, just because that may at some point be the only mode that we have to use moving forward. It's a great question.
Yep. Thank you, Joe, for that question. Thank you, Chris. So I think we have time for maybe one more question, and I like to always ask this question. So what are some resources? It could be articles that you read, podcasts, blogs that you would recommend to other diversity and inclusion leaders to stay engaged and to stay uplifted during this time.
Yep. So that's a great question. There are multiple things that I think diversity and inclusion leaders should be and could be tapping into right now. One of the things that I committed to doing about 3.5 years ago, when I started into diversity and inclusion, was reading one book a month on the topic of diversity and inclusion. And I got to tell you, that habit of just opening up and reading one book a month has really paid dividends in just truly understanding how to broaden your mind and really think about things from a very, very different perspective. But that being said, if I had to commit to one thing that I would recommend all diversity and inclusion leaders do right now, as far as a resource go or a way of tapping into something, and this is going to be a little more creative than probably you were expecting, Jarrett, but I would say the one thing that I would tap into is the resource of other diversity and inclusion leaders. And what I mean by that is there are several network groups that are out right now that are focused on diversity and inclusion, and they have all gone to a Zoom-based meeting format. And we come together on a regular basis now, at least once a week, and we talk about pressing topics that we're all having to deal with. I'm part of several myself. One is the Conference Board, which is a national Chief Diversity Officer network that has been set up that focuses both on domestic as well as global diversity and inclusion topics. And we have daily contact through email, but we also have weekly contact through a Skype type meeting. And I would highly recommend that if you're not already, that you do tap into networks like that. Another network that I'm part of is with the healthcare systems. So there's a Chief Diversity Officer network associated with hospital systems. And we only meet about every third month, so once a quarter. But in the interim, there is constant communication through email. And the beauty of these networks is that, one, you don't feel isolated in trying to solve for issues that you're dealing with within your organization or within your company. You have a group of people who you can bounce ideas off of, who have probably been through similar circumstances that you're probably trying to navigate through. And then you'll find out that there are things that others are trying to navigate that you've probably already gone through that you could, provide some insight and guidance for. So I would say the number one resource to tap into are networks that are set up around topics that you're interested in or that you're focused on in your personal or professional life right now.
Love it, love it. So I know we are at time. Chris, thank you so much for being with us today. We had a few more questions from people, but we are going to have to hold those, that we may just do those offline. Did you have any final thoughts to share with everyone?
Yeah, I guess I'll give you a couple final thoughts. The first thought, I want to do a quick plug actually for Canaris. I have to tell you, not that Canaris hasn't always been, in my opinion, a fantastic solution. I think right now with the pandemic, in really wanting to set yourself and your organization up for success, their platform, I think, is a very easy way to allow you to gain insights to help you from a strategic perspective in setting things up so that you can be very successful moving forward. The last thing that I'll say, which is probably the first thing that I started off with, is if you haven't done this already, I would highly recommend everyone on this call, and if you're on this call, connect with 2 other people and do this, is do a personal inventory on yourself. And when I say personal inventory, what I mean is, where are you spending your greatest resource? And your greatest resource is your time. And what you have to ask yourself is, am I spending my time doing things that are not only productive for me personally, but also productive for others? And if you do that personal inventory and you find out that you're spending a lot of your time in a fear mode, in a worry mode, in a, what if crazy scenario mode, what you'll come to the conclusion is that that's a bad use of my most valued asset, which is my time. And do the inventory so that you can rethink what you want to do and where you want to be moving forward. And I think if and when you do that, it will set you up not only for success today, but also as we navigate and grow through this pandemic, it will set you up for success tomorrow as well. So.
Awesome. Love it. Thank you, Chris. Thank you again to all of our attendees for sharing your time with us, especially those that ask thoughtful questions. We appreciate those. Our next webinar will be this Thursday, April the 16th. We'll be discussing how to support remote Muslim employees during Ramadan. That'll be at 3 p.m. Central Time. So please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. It's Canaries Inc. You can follow us for news about D&I trends, updates, as well as future webinars. So I hope everyone stays safe and healthy. Have an amazing day. Bye-bye.
Bye now.